Welcome back to the next upcoming episode of the Balanced Boss Mom podcast. I'm your host, Erika, and today we are welcoming Jessica to the podcast. Now, I do want to let you know this conversation is going to have a trigger warning to this episode because we are talking about things like infertility, pregnancy, just a little bit of background from Jessica and her journey. But nonetheless, I am so excited to welcome this conversation, and I'm excited to open the doors about infertility, bring awareness to this situation. So this is a little bit of a trigger warning here. If you want to pause the episode, feel free to pause the episode for this afternoon, evening, or even morning if you're watching this today. So welcome, Jessica. How are you?
Great. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I always love this conversation. It's very near and dear to my heart. And so I just encourage people lean into your own self-care and your support system and whatever this brings. And hopefully it brings you some hope along the way too. So excited to be here.
Yes, no, I'm really excited about this conversation. And the topic of this conversation that I have the title for you is Jessica's Journey with Infertility. So I know we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive with infertility. And this is a brave story that's coming from you. And I hope it touches a lot of people with this episode. So let's start off telling me a little bit about your journey, how it came about with infertility, and what was the hardest part of this. I don't want to say chapter in your life because it's not a chapter, it's a season.
Yeah.
So what was the hardest part that you had during this season?
So growing up, I had always had issues with my female cycle. I didn't have any family members that had trouble with infertility, but there was female cycle issues, just irregular cycles, a lot of hormonal imbalances and things along the way. I didn't anticipate that it would be disruptive to a fertility component of things. But what we found is early, I was diagnosed with PCOS or polycystic ovarian syndrome. And just really, for those that haven't heard of that, there's a hormonal imbalance between what they call your FSH, your follicle stimulating hormone, and your LH, your luteinizing hormone. So there's an imbalance hormonally. But oftentimes women struggle with cysts on their ovaries or things like that. Showed up a little more hormonally, but it also showed up that when the follicles were going to be released for fertilization, they were in a pearl-like structure. So they weren't individual follicles. So it was very difficult for them to be fertilized. We did some medical treatments early on and we experienced our first loss. But I think for me, the hardest part of this journey along the way was really going back to childhood, because it was my only desire was to be a mom. So when we talked about like career days and what do you want to do when you grow up, like I really had no other desire than to be a mom. Like there wasn't I want to go be an astronaut or a teacher. I didn't want to do any of those things. I just wanted to stay home and have babies. And so, the hard part was that idea that I had to reckon with a lot of healing along the way, with the idea that the very thing that I should be designed to do as a woman is carry babies and have children is the thing that I feel the most broken in and unable to do. And so it was a lot of identity work that I did along that journey of really looking at I'm not coming into a healing path with I'm not broken, and my body's going through some things. It has some things to resolve, and there was a huge healing pathway I went through. But in that season of like not hating myself and also being present with emotions to grieve the fact that we didn't have children, and our journey was a 10-year one. So it was, I try not to get my feathers too ruffled sometimes when people say, we've been trying for 3 months, like that was the other thing, that the comparison when you want something and you don't have it yet is really a difficult issue that I've come across for women in that space. It's like, oh, well, we've been trying this long, or we've been trying this long. And so I'd be like, 6 months is nothing, a year is nothing. And they'll be like, well, we've been trying for 10 years.
Yeah, that's
It's a long time.
It's nothing to what you've been through and how you've had to deal with infertility. And I understand that could be very challenging in an aspect where somebody's like, oh, I've been trying for 3 months or 6 months or to a year. And you're like, hey, wait a minute. I've been doing this for quite some time,
Yeah.
kind of back off a little bit,
Yeah.
but you still have to, people have to respect other people's space. Because
Yeah.
when something like such like infertility can catch somebody so off guard,
Yes.
and I've had miscarriages. I've had a couple of them. So I can understand where, for example, my sister, she's currently pregnant. And although I'm very excited that she's pregnant with her second child, I'm almost like, well, dang, what about me and my, second child? But I've kind of came to terms with it where I'm learning to kind of respect the space of, it may not be my time to have that second child.
Yeah.
It just may not be in that space. And sometimes we need to normalize. The key word is to normalize people's feelings
Yeah.
and normalize when to say things and when not to say things, because you don't know what that season is bringing up for that time period.
Yeah.
Whether it's
Everybody's
a year. Go
everybody's
ahead. Go
journey
ahead.
is so individual. And I think when we can
Mm-hmm.
own that our journey is individual, not that we can't derive hope from other people's experiences or even find models to help us navigate difficult things, our story will never be like somebody else's. And being okay with our own story is a big component of it. I don't even remember at what point people started asking us, so do you have any children? Like the standard get to know you questions are like the weather and like, what do you do?
Mm-hmm.
And do you have kids? That's the standard. And so, very early on in those stages, it would be a difficult question. Like, how do you tell somebody like, no, I don't have kids. I really want kids, but we're not there yet. And we're,
I
we're on a
almost.
journey of infertility. So I started telling people, that's a faith walk that we have right now. We desire them. They just haven't arrived yet. And it's really interesting to watch people's expressions to be able to absorb that,
Mm-hmm.
because some people you can see the shift for the
But
ones that
it's
are prepared to walk alongside of you or like be present.
right. But it's also where it's like haven't even normalized, like normalize, hey, it's a sensitive, like it's a
Yes.
sensitive subject. Don't talk about that subject in
Yeah.
reference to infertility.
Yeah.
So I have another question for you on
Sure.
how did it, and I know you talked about it impacting you emotionally and mentally. How did you navigate that in reference to the infertility?
So part of this, very early on, I was very what I call emotionally immature about it. I was really
Mm-hmm.
wounded, I think, because I didn't expect it. When we had our first loss, I completely dissociated and went back to grad school. I tell people I did what every normal person does when they experience a loss. You go back to school. But the reality is
Right.
I very early on struggled with the hardness of it. And just like I said, feeling so broken. I was sad a lot, borderline depressed, just really feeling the heaviness and a lot of questioning about who I am, what am I meant to do. And I went on a career path, even though I didn't want to. And I think that was difficult. The other thing that was really emotionally difficult was seeing other people who didn't have the same desires get what I felt like I wanted. Other people having babies. My siblings, both younger than me, had babies. In fact, finished having their babies before I even started. And so it's kind of that whole process. Somewhere in the middle of doing some of that healing and stuff, I began to transition my emotions to really look at it as this is an opportunity, one, for me to clean up my mess internally about who I am and what kind of mom I want to be and start working on myself from that aspect of in a hopeful pattern. Like when this baby arrives, here's what I want to fix in me, sort of thing. And also thinking of it from the emotional aspect of sowing seeds. And so very early on, I would not go to other people's baby showers or participate in baby related things because it would be so painful. And I made a decision that I wanted to reap a harvest of celebration when I believed I would have a child. It was always when, not if. And so I said, I want to sow good seeds so that I am not showing up in pain and bitterness the whole way there, that I reap a harvest of pain and bitterness when my gift arrives. So I transitioned what I did emotionally to think about how can I be present for somebody else's life and celebration for them so that when it's time for me, I have not giving to get, but just giving to be present differently with my experience so that I'm not planting all these seeds of bitterness and pain. And I have this pain tree to still deal with when my child does arrive. kind of mindset. And that definitely helped me emotionally navigate things from a lot deeper perspective and huge harvest of rewards that I never anticipated when we did have our daughter.
That's good. Now, I know we are talking about infertility, and you can stop me at any point in
Yeah.
time to change the subject whenever you're ready. I don't want to keep talking about it if
Oh,
you
it's
don't want to
fine.
keep talking about it. And so, one of the things I know that often comes up with infertility is the silence and the stigma that really stands bold behind infertility. And so, what do you wish others knew or understood about infertility? And then also, what is one thing a friend or family member could have done to kind of break that silence for you on your
Mm,
behalf,
yeah.
or to break that stigma for you as well?
It wasn't until we experienced our first loss that I realized how many other women around me had experienced a loss. I shared with a few people and they're like, oh, yeah, me too. And all of a sudden, all these women started coming out of the woodwork that experienced the losses that they had experienced in this journey. And what I found is that as I connected to a support community, that all the women there were on a journey to motherhood and at different stages of it. Some had never experienced a pregnancy and had never taken for them with treatments and all that stuff. Some had experienced multiple pregnancies and multiple
Mhm.
losses. I think that the stigma, silence around it really is the amount of pain a woman goes through emotionally every single month. You develop really bad coping habits and strategies. It's like, okay, well, let me just test this month. Is it every single what I found is this hypervigilance, first of all, that you go through when you're in an infertility journey of like every single month, you have this hypervigilant about every single symptom your body experiences. Your
Mhm.
experience of nausea, your experience tired, like, is it this month? Is it this month? And it is literally
Right.
like an emotional roller coaster every 30 days. And so nobody talks about that part of things, how like the amount of tests you take with hope and then the amount of negatives that you
Get
get
let
are
down.
nothing. And it's like up, down, up, down, up, down. And even the amount of losses, they say 1 in 4 pregnancies and in infertility, in a miscarriage. And, to
Mhm.
think about us as women experiencing such deep loss, the dismissiveness of loss is also a really big portion of that in the infertility community because people, and then the length of the term of the pregnancy too. So some people will say,
Mhm.
like, you only had it 7 weeks or 6 weeks, or you had it 20 weeks or you had it 25 weeks. Like there's just this, but we as women emotionally bond with the baby from the moment of conception. So there's an emotional bond that's part of us that gets removed and I think we don't talk about that part of things, like being present with other women with the loss. I remember our first loss, we had a little bit of medication support to try early on and we
Mhm.
got pregnant. And when I called the doctor's office, of course, I'm crying and I'm devastated. And the nurse said to me, she's like, you girls just find these things out way too early these days. Like in my day, like we didn't find this out until we were further along and you just know too early and stuff. And I thought, how insensitive. Clearly, you've never walked through this. And at first, I was a little angry. And then I'm like, you just don't know what you don't know. And I've got to choose to put that aside because those statements of people
You're
really saying those
you're
things.
kidding.
Yeah. No.
You're kidding me. Are you kidding
No.
me?
So I did say something to the doctor. I'm like, look, I know you got a lot going on and I know you help women in pregnancies, but that was really
Mhm.
unprofessional because yes, maybe with technology, we do know earlier than ever, but it doesn't take the
Mhm.
sting away from somebody who's experiencing something really difficult. And so
Oh,
for me,
no, 'cause I had a nurse practitioner tell me and I talk about it in my past episodes, that if you continue to get pregnant, you're gonna die.
yeah,
And it's like the bedside manners these nurses do not have.
yeah.
I'm like, what did they teach you in nursing school, to just be a nurse and not have the bedside
Yeah.
manners? Like, that's very insensitive, and I'm sorry that she said
Yeah,
that to
I
you.
ended up so this doctor was actually practicing in a couple locations, and so after that, I would only see him in one of his other locations because the staff was so different at the other
Mhm.
location. But I think in terms of breaking the silence and breaking the stigma is being present with people to mourn loss and to recognize
Mhm,
that so many women are experiencing difficulty. And there's something to be said about when we have support when we're grieving and grieving not having children, grieving having lost children along the way. That is so
mhm,
potent, and I think that is the most important thing, is do you have a support community that you can go to be present with you for whatever you need? Maybe you need somebody
mhm,
to come and cook dinner for you. When we experienced our second loss, it was a little different because we had been on different treatments and medications, and I was actually in labor, and I didn't know that I was in labor until I actually had labored. I didn't know what it was. And so I called the doctor's office. I'm like, this is pretty intense pain. And the doctor was out of town. And they're like, well, we can give you Tylenol. You can go to the hospital. I'm like, okay. Well, I knew we had lost the baby or that there was no heartbeat. And
mhm.
we were out trying to buy a house. So I was like out looking at houses with realtors in labor pains. I was driving down the road having contractions. I had no idea until later that's what was happening. And so for me, it was just like having a community of women to be present with me. And so I'd reached out to a friend of mine and she's like, Jessica, that's what labor is. That your body is trying to release the baby. And I was like, oh, so I think the other piece that's really it is a silence that needs to be better from the medical side is the lack of education around some of these things. When they tell a woman who's experiencing a miscarriage that this is going to be like a heavy period, they lie.
They lie.
Bottom line, they
They
lie.
do.
And I will say each and every miscarriage
They
is
lie for a
different and
reason.
different stages, but it is a lie. It is more than a heavy period, let me tell you.
It's more than, and I've dealt with it twice. So it is a lie.
Yeah.
But I do think that these nurses, and if you're listening to this podcast, I hope you're not getting irritated. But for the nurses out there that do have good bedside manners, thank you.
Yeah.
Because that's more than what you could possibly know when somebody is either going through an infertility issue or going through a miscarriage. Thank you
Yeah.
for doing what you do.
Yeah.
But for the ones that are not doing their appropriate duty to have the bedside manners where you're bringing your home life to your work life, or if somebody made you upset with your
Yeah.
coworkers or whatever the situation may be, that needs to be talked and rectified a little bit more
Yeah. I
because
think
it's putting the patient in harm's way more than what you can expect.
Yeah. I think people that come across very insensitive have not experienced the pain in the area that they're working in. I think if you
Mhm.
have experienced this pain or have somebody close to you that has, you have a little bit different, like you said, bedside manner, but you have a little bit more empathy,
Empathy.
And
Yeah,
so
you have a little bit more
if you
empathy.
if you struggle with having empathy, or you're bothered by people having
Take an
strong
empathy class.
if you well, you might need to move nursing professions. Let's just say don't be in the infertility,
Yeah,
birthing,
birthing.
pregnancy
Yeah.
sector. Find another one.
So sorry that you had to go, like, this
Yeah.
is a walk of life that you have your own journey
Yeah.
that you've gone through, and it takes a lot of openness and a lot of courage for somebody to talk about something like this because there's people out there that are still dealing with infertility. I have a friend that I follow that is on their fertility journey and they've
Mhm.
been experiencing infertility journey and I've been wanting to touch so much light on this situation because I want to give her hope in reference not just to her but other women as well where if you have a woman issue keep advocating for yourself
Yeah.
because the more you advocate for yourself, the more answers that you will get from these doctors. Sometimes these doctors just want to collect a check, and it's not always about collecting a check. It's about helping a woman's well-being. And I even had in the field that I'm in the medical insurance field, and I had a
Mhm.
lady call this past week and he is trying to get a hysterectomy.
Mm.
And she was like, so you're just telling me I can't get a hysterectomy? Like I just can't? And I was like, well, ma'am, my hands are tied. I can't make this approval for this hysterectomy. You have to go through these steps that are in the paperwork in order to get this approved.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, the doctor said they're not going to do it. And I was like, well, have you tried looking at maybe I can get you some other listings for you? Just things like that just to help the
Mhm.
situation a little bit at ease. Because if you're not willing to of course, if you're saying like you don't want to put this stuff in your body and inject everything in your body, I get that, but I can't make something
Yeah.
happen overnight. I can't make it be covered. And so I know you talk a little bit about having the hope. And so are there certain practices or like journaling therapy, maybe going into infertility groups on Facebook that might have carried you through something like this?
Yeah. So hope is a really important word for me. I found out, I studied a little bit about this, after our daughter was born. She's 3.5, our little miracle girl. And so I was studying about the concept of hope. And there's a guy, his name is Dr. C.R. Snyder, and he postulates that hope is comprised of three things: goal setting, pathway to completion, and a sense of agency, which is the ability to believe you can do something. So let's say your goal is to become a mom, right? And there's multiple pathways to
Right.
completion. Those things are easy to define. What really happened, I think, for me, and what gets lost in most people, is this sense of agency, which is the ability to believe. So I found for me that partnering with people that could support my sense of agency was a really powerful thing. And so I actually do a signature talk right now about the hope factor. And so I postulate my journey is that there's actually three characters: hope stealers, which are people, their intention may not be bad, but they take away that sense of agency through their comments and their actions. And so if you have hope stealers, distancing yourself or setting boundaries with them, right? Sometimes it's your medical practitioner. Sometimes it's your family and friends. And then
Sure.
there's hope dealers. And I say that hope dealers are people that don't necessarily know you, but they can speak good into your life. And so finding those support groups, there is, I found a support group that had in-person meetings and virtual meetings. It's called In Due Time. They're out of the Dallas area, but they have nationwide groups. And for me, in that hope dealers part is finding somebody that's on a similar path as you, meaning they are trying similar things that you're trying in terms of treatments or supports. And you want to find somebody that's a step or two ahead of you and a step or two behind you. Because for me, it felt good to be able to connect with somebody who's on a similar journey. When we did in vitro a couple times, and having somebody who had gone through in vitro with similar pathway to mine, I could always ask them questions like, well, what was this like? Or what do I need to ask about this? But then I actually was partnered with somebody from one of those groups who had not was getting ready to start in vitro. So I was a couple steps ahead of her. And so that kind of like reaching above, so to speak, and reaching behind, like that concept of connected to both and, felt like I could give back and not just, I wasn't just taking. And then the last character I say is like hope healers. And hope healers are people that I say step in to heal the wounds they didn't create. And so no matter what wounds you have sustained in this journey or in life, traumas about it, other things, it's finding people to partner with from a healing perspective. And that could be like friends and family, but it also could be therapists or coaches. Grief related supports is a really big deal. Finding somebody to walk through the grief of journey, the loss of not having what you want to have yet, maybe the losses you've already experienced. Any loss, emotional, spiritual, physical, or mental, is a big loss, and dealing with those emotions is a big deal. So those are things when I think of hope that I would really encourage people. Therapists and coaches are great. Journaling out. I use the concept of a brain dump, which is different than journaling. It's actually just taking and getting all of the things out. It's kind of like walking into a room that's really messy and it's yours to decorate how you want to. You're going to clear out everything that's there first, right? Repaint, freshen up. Well, we need to do the same thing with our brain. So I tell people, take out paper and write down everything you're thinking, feeling, and believing, the good, bad, and the ugly of it all. And then when you're done, tear it up and throw it away, or some people prefer to burn it. The other thing
Burn it. I was just about to say burn it.
The other thing that's really powerful though is our voice is so powerful in this. And so sometimes we want to write, and some people are not great writers. So I tell people, like, you have a cell phone, and every cell phone has something called voice memos. So take out your voice memos and hit record and act as if you're talking to the person or the situation, and let it out of your voice, all that you're thinking, feeling, and believing. And the trick is when you're done to delete it, don't send it to the person that you're upset about, right? But your brain and your heart actually think that you've had space to express yourself. And so releasing those words out of us can really help that healing sense of agency in what we're going through. And so those were things that were helpful to me. and also to other people that I've encountered on the journey as well.
I like that. I really do.
Yeah.
Now, before we wrap up this awesome conversation, I do want to ask you, what were some of the words of encouragement that you can leave for someone that is dealing with their own infertility journey today?
I would say don't give up on the desires that are in your heart. Continue to stay on the path and find people that can support you in what your desires are. So many people along the way would what I call silver lining my journey,
Mm.
and they would say that's a Brene Brown term, but she would it's the idea of like, well, you've been a mom to all these kids that you've been teaching, or you've been a mom in this way. And it felt dismissive to me. It's not the same thing as holding my own baby in my own arms. And people would say, "Oh, you can always foster, you could adopt." Be present with
A good thing.
somebody, even if you're uncomfortable with where they're at in their story, for those that are supporting. But for those in the mix of it, find those people that are supportive of you and your desires and not silver lining it. And then
Hmm.
find places to sow into joy. Allow your heart to find places of joy because nothing can
Hmm.
help propel you forward other than more than finding places of joy. And I know it's difficult when you're mourning and you're grieving and there's pain, but
Hmm.
there's something very healing about finding places of joy. And that may be having a pet, that may be doing some community service work, maybe you're in a faith community. Whatever it is that you bring joy, that brings your heart joy, allow yourself some time to really experience that because you can have both and emotions, right? But allowing yourself permission to experience joy can be a really powerful thing in helping you along the way.
Like those words of encouragement. And I like that I'm able to share your story with the world today.
Mhm.
So before we go, can you share where we can find you in your socials, if you don't mind?
Absolutely. I have a website, vibrantvoice.life. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Jessica Vibrant Hammock, Hammock, both on Facebook and Instagram. I talk a lot about trauma and a whole bunch of different things and my journey. So absolutely. And if you don't have those support people in your life, feel free to reach out and just say, "Hey, I heard you on the podcast," because nobody should be alone in this journey.
That is so true. You shouldn't deserve to be alone on this journey, you guys. So, friends and family, loved ones, whoever is listening to this podcast, I want to thank you, Jessica, for taking the time
Yeah.
to get on this podcast. I know we've had a little scheduling issue.
We got it, girl. We got it.
But we got it through. We got it through. And I made another friend, y'all. I made another friend on the podcast. So if this episode resonates with you, please know that you aren't alone in this situation. And another thing I want to talk about is make sure that you don't feel shame in the situation that was you have to be dealt with. Not necessarily dealing with that situation, but understanding that you're not alone and there's no shame around the conversations that you can have. And this can reach with your strength so many different people with what you're going through. And
Yeah.
again, if you find this conversation helpful, share this with another friend, coworker, another woman, because you know I am. I'll be sharing, girl. Okay. Okay. But as always, I want to thank you guys for being a part of the Balanced Boss Mom conversation, the community, and just making sure that this is a real, raw conversation that we had with Jessica today. I appreciate you more than you ever know, Jessica.
Oh, thank you for letting me share my story.
You're welcome. Until next time, I want you to know to take care of yourself. And I will see you guys on the next episode of the Balanced Boss Mom. And yeah, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, okay? Because your girl is everywhere. I am on Instagram, Facebook. I'm on, what else am I on? I went blank. YouTube. Y'all go comment on my YouTube, okay? And then also, I am also on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts to. I am very, very grateful for each and every one of the guests that have been on this podcast. And you have now just been added to that
I
list,
love it.
Jessica. So um I can't wait. I can't wait till we have another
Yeah.
conversation and open more doors. Bye guys. Until
Bye.
next time. Bye.